right, well, good morning and welcome to the May 26th LEF2 board meeting. Again, thank you for joining us virtually. Thanks to our office staff for taking all the time to make sure that we can actually get together in this manner. Let's go ahead and start off with a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters across all lines. All right, thank you. Hopefully the board has seen a number of different emails come across. We do have a second link for our executive session. We'll follow, and the link's been sent out again, I think, this morning. If you don't have that, please let us know, and we'll send it back out again so you have it, so we can go ahead and take care of business following our regular course of business. There's a few items on the agenda today with an anticipated end time somewhere around noon or a little bit after. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Before us, under the first action item, we do have the approval of minutes from our last board meeting. I entertain a motion to do so.
Second.
Okay, got one. Is there a second?
Second.
Got it. All right. Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the minutes from our April meeting. Any discussion? Kind of hard to see or hear, so seeing or hearing none. Steve, you want to do roll call? Probably the best way. I don't know how you want to do it.
Yeah, you can do it by just to see if there's any objections. Approval.
Yeah.
You do a voice vote. I think it'll be fine for this.
All right. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the minutes are adopted. The first item on our list for take care of this morning is our interim work plan approval. And so I'll turn over to Executive Nelson for kind of leading this thing. I think Jacob's doing it, but I'll give to Steve for the introduction.
Jacob, are you ready to go? All right.
Yes, I should be seeing my screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good morning. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The purpose of this presentation is for the board to make any changes to the interim draft plan and then also to adopt that plan. Just as a reminder, went over the draft plan last month, so I'm going to spare you and not go over each item on that plan again, unless there are any questions on those items or there have been changes made since last month. So benefit topics, made a couple changes here. We added a briefing on Senate Bill 5453. That was the, well, I'll be talking about that a lot later in today's meeting, but that was the merger and benefit improvement bill that was considered by the legislature last session. And then also added the law enforcement officer demographic impact follow-up after last month's discussion around some of those issues. No other changes to the draft. However, I also did want to draw attention to items 4, 5, and 6. Those items we are planning on coordinating with the Select Committee on Pension Policy. LEF2 board staff had a initial meeting with the Select Committee staff and went over the draft agenda and discussed possibly coordinating those items. Once the agenda is adopted, we would formally share it with the Select Committee and then provide regular updates to the Select Committee on our progress. And then also LEF2 board staff does meet with the Select Committee staff to also go over these items that we coordinate. Actuarial topics, there's no changes to this portion of the draft agenda. These are for the most part regularly scheduled items that are mostly required by statute. I did want to draw some attention to item 4. This is for the LEF2 strategic planning meeting in October. A suggestion from the state actuary. And then administrative topics, no changes to the draft agenda. You may recall last month I did not have items 7 and 8 on the slide, but we did discuss those, the board expectations and board elections being one of the administrative topics. So here is the draft interim calendar we put together with all of the topics on the previous slides laid out by month. This calendar does assume no August meeting, which has been past practice of the board. And then also wanted to draw attention to survivor option reelection. So I had this on the presentation in December. I was being too pessimistic. I thought we would be lucky to hear anything back from the IRS or our tax counsel, Ice Miller, before December. But we actually have received some initial information just a week or so ago. And so it may be more appropriate to move that item up to next month's meeting so we can brief the board on that update we've received and any decisions that will need to be made by the board before the end of the interim. And then also October's strategic planning meeting. Historically, that has been an off-site meeting. Obviously, this has been a different couple years with working remotely. And so, so historically, it's not in the state investment boardroom where we've had our meetings. But given that we are still likely to have some board members and others attending these meetings remotely, the board could make a decision to go ahead and have that meeting in the investment board boardroom this year. So the action items today in front of the board are any changes to the draft interim plan. This could include moving the survivor option reelection presentation up to June, as I discussed, and then also a decision on whether to hold the October strategic planning at the State Investment Board boardroom with an option to attend remotely, or to have it offsite if the board would like staff to work on finding an offsite location. And then lastly, for the board to adopt the interim plan. Okay, that completes my presentation. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Jacob, any questions for Jacob? So Jacob, just because I don't have the slide right in front of me right now, you had mentioned the survivor reelection options we moved up to June. That was on your calendar that way, correct?
It was actually on the calendar in December. Okay. So we would need to move that up to June.
And your thoughts on why you would move that up again?
So I didn't think we would hear back from Ice Miller, our tax counsel, or the IRS. I was hoping that we'd be lucky to hear back in December, but we just found out some information a couple of weeks ago that I think would be helpful for the board to hear sooner than later.
Okay. Well, we'll break this down in a couple of different components. And I guess for our planning purposes, I would entertain a motion to move the survivor option reelection follow-up, which is scheduled in December till June. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
Yeah, Dennis, this is Mark. I'll make the motion that we move the survivor option reelection follow-up up into June from December.
River seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Discussion on that item alone.
And what that final budget will look like. We should have that at the
Hearing or seeing.
Chairman, Senator Holy had his hand up.
Okay, I can't see it. All I got is a screen out the agenda item. I think I lost everybody. Senator Holy, go ahead. But
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's on a separate topic here. I don't want to step in the middle of a motion. Let's take care of this and then come back to me.
All right, sounds good. All right, on the motion and to move the survivor option reelection to the June schedule, I didn't see or hear anybody asking to speak. I'll wait a second. Again, okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion is adopted. Move that. All right, Senator Holy, did you have comments now since that motion's been taken care of?
Well, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this is slightly off message, but it's on topic for what we're doing here. I wonder if you're aware, you know, usually the board's far ahead of me on this kind of thing, Nelson and staff are, but I've been recently been getting tuned up a little bit by some retirees regarding a disability benefits letter they received from a DRS. And I have several concerns. Without going into detail, I just, do you know anything about that? Are you aware of that? Maybe it's a question for Steve. And if so, maybe we should add that to the agenda too. That seems to be a little bit of a hot item right now.
Yes, Steve, I think, I'm not sure if he's planning to cover that under his administrative update. I'm not sure where that's going to fit.
Well, yeah, no, it could fit in now. I was going to give an update on it then, but the DRS recently sent out a couple of letters. They sent out one a couple months ago to all catastrophic disability retirees, letting them know that their benefits might be reviewed to see if they continue to remain eligible. And then they recently sent out another letter to 13, is what I'm told, retirees. And that created, I heard from a number of the retirees as well, Senator Hawley. I followed up with DRS. Director Guerin at DRS told me yesterday that they have, the agencies decided to reevaluate the communication that went out and the criteria for who it was sent to. So they're going to send a follow-up question or a follow-up letter to all of the members who've received these letters in the past, letting them know what the new plan will be moving forward. And they intend to coordinate that new plan and the communications to the retirees with the board staff. They DRS is available, and they'd be willing to speak to the board in June, for instance, if you'd like, about what they've done at that time and what the plans are moving forward.
Steve, this is Senator Rivers. I would really appreciate that, because this seems, just based on my very limited knowledge, it seems like a fairly significant policy shift. So I'm certain that there's information that I don't have, and I think it would be really useful to have them come and speak to us and educate us about exactly what they're doing and why they're trying to do it. So that would just be my 2 cents.
Yeah, and Director Guerin did say they would make sure that they would be available for the June board meeting. So if you wanted to add a briefing from DRS to the work plan for June, that could be done.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that begs the question then. I would make a motion that we do add this to the agenda. This is rather significant.
Second.
Sorry about that. Motion's been made and seconded to add this item to our June 16th agenda items. Is there discussion on this?
Yeah, this is Mark Johnston. I'd speak in favor of the motion. I'd like to hear what's happening out there in the bigger, wide world of the disability stuff as well. I think it'd be very helpful.
Okay. Hearing or seeing no other comments, all in favor of adding this to the June 16th meeting agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, added to the agenda. Thank you, Senator. I should say thank you, Senators. All right, So before us, then we have the agenda that we made a couple of changes. Now, I think the discussion item, Stephen, you need to probably jump in here. I think that the October, is that the educational day? I'm looking at trying to find it on there.
Yes, October is the strategic planning meeting.
Thank you.
I was going to talk a little bit about the SIB boardroom also in the admin update, but this kind of ties into it now. Historically, we've done the October strategic planning more informally and used an off-site place, so it's not the SIB boardroom. This year, we don't know how many board members and other parties might be planning to attend meetings remotely. And so both, for practical reasons and budgetary reasons, we're trying to figure out whether there's a need to find a location for the offsite, or whether it would be okay with the board members to use the SIB boardroom this year. It's set up for remote participation, and it's also large enough that if there were, say, 4, 5, 6 board members, social distancing could be approved. We don't know what the rules are going to be regarding board meetings by September, but that was a question we wanted to throw out to you, get some feedback from you on what you'd like, so that if we do need to find another location, we can start doing that.
Everybody comfortable moving? Go ahead, Mark.
No, so I was going to ask the chair if this was a time for some comments about that particular subject.
Yes, please.
So I think, first of all, we need to make sure that we comply with all the health regulations put forward by the governor or the governor's office. Secondly, I would advocate that it's really my history with the board is that October meeting has been very helpful in establishing and maintaining relationships between all the board members from all the different stakeholder groups. I'm a big advocate of continuing that in person as we go forward and as people are comfortable with it and as the regulations allow us to do so. I think it has provided a tremendous amount of value to get together in person with each other and sit down and talk face and rather than do the non-face-to-face meetings. That's it.
Thank you. Are there other comments? I think what we're looking for right now is that, as Executive Director Nelson said, is that we are looking for direction for planning purposes. Right now, the State Investment Board, as Steve mentioned, probably 6, 7 people can probably get in there. We don't know the rules. If we're okay moving that forward with a plan to do that, if we need, I just know that for planning purposes, if we need to go bigger, because we think more people are going to be there in person, I think they probably need to have a secondary plan put in place.
Yeah, we're expecting some kind of guidance, hopefully in the near future, with different options, say, for instance, about, if everybody's vaccinated, can you ignore the social distancing? It's a little bit hard to predict what things are going to look like, what the rules are going to look like in September at this point in time. But based on the current rules, we know we could accompany 4, 5, 6 board members without any concerns about violating any of the rules.
Steve, are you comfortable adopting this agenda now that we made a couple modifications, knowing that we would have an October strategic planning training day, and then as we get closer, we can start to look at locations? Is that are you okay with that?
Davis?
Yeah, some of the locations, I don't know about availability. Right now, even honestly, a lot of the locations are having a hard time booking out into the future because they don't know what the rules are going to be.
Right. Steve, go ahead. I'm sorry. I saw you finally pop
No,
up.
I appreciate it. I'm off on this, but would it be okay to entertain a motion at this point to maybe stick with the SIB room for this year as we're learning about the regulations and not getting too far ahead of ourselves and trying to go off-site this time around?
Yeah, that's what kind of, I think that's where we're going to end up. My thought is like Steve said, if something comes out and changes that, or we can add more people. Okay, now I got it in front of me. Thank you. If we add more people, then do we need to look at a larger facility? You know, like Mark kind of explained, the benefits of us gathering in October is we work all together. We usually have people in the audience, our stakeholders, get to listen to some of the things we're doing. So that usually gets to be a well-attended meeting. You know, it takes most of that day. We're stuck really in limbo right now. I'm not sure if we just adopt the agenda item, and as we get closer, we go ahead and start looking at properties to see what the rules are going to be. I'm fine with going to Vegas if anybody else wants to go. Look at Tor. Tor's like, now he's pulling his hair out. You're not going there. I know it. So, Steve, if you want to make that motion, I'm fine with it. I'm good. We can revisit it later.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like there was a hope for some kind of clarity about the location since the SIB is hoping that we would, schedule something now. I guess my motion would be to schedule our October meeting at the SIB boardroom and, leave it. Hopefully rules will change by that time to be more clear and allow more people there. But also give us some flexibility that we have a space and it's all set up.
All right.
Second.
All right, Senator, I got you. There's a motion made and seconded to go ahead and move forward with the State Investment Board, at least for planning purposes. Is there a discussion on this? Yes, Wolf, go ahead. I see your hand. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just totally agree and underscore how helpful it would be to staff to know this now and to plan for use of a state-owned or controlled facility. We, for example, are pretty much writing all our plans in pencil on cheap paper at this point because we can't write them as fast as they're needing to change. And I think that may settle out as we go into the fall, but if we can give them some guidance now, and it's a place where we have a relationship with SIB and we know we can use a facility, it just simplifies everything rather than figuring out how to seek out and acquire yet a third facility from somewhere else.
Thank you. Mark? You got something? All right. Are there other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor of, providing direction to staff to go ahead and set the State Investment Board for our October meeting. Probably simply what to say. So, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. So then I think the last piece of that agenda was just to adopt the agenda in its entirety as we have modified it and made a minor correction. So I entertain a motion for adoption.
So moved.
So thank you. Rick.
Second.
Seconded. Discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. And I think our Dave's trying to connect right now. I'm not sure. Tammy, are you working with him by chance? Our Dave, are you good?
Yes, I am.
All right, good. Good to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Steve, I think that took care of, unless I'm missing something, we made a couple of minor changes to the schedule. Provided direction for the State Investment Board for our October meeting, and the agenda has been adopted. The interim board plan has been adopted. Is there anything else on that item?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, item number 3, looks like a presentation again by Jacob, but I'll turn it over to Steve first on Senate Bill 5453.
Yeah, Jacob, you ready to go to introduce this topic?
Yes, almost. Okay, once again, for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. This presentation, you're not going to have to just listen to me. I've got Mitch from the State Actuary's Office will also be joining. I'm going to discuss the benefit improvement section of this bill and answer any policy questions regarding the bill. And then Mitch will discuss the actuarial fiscal note and answer any questions related to the fiscal note. And then Mitch will hand it back off to me at the end for discussion on next steps. So the issue in front of the board today is that the board had requested in the May meeting a briefing on the Left 2 benefit improvement proposed as part of Senate Bill 5453 last legislative session. As a reminder, this bill was proposed by Senator Schessler, who's the chair of the Select Committee on Pension Policy, as part of the Senate operating budget that was proposed by Senate Republicans. The bill did not receive a hearing, but OSA did complete actuarial fiscal note. I should add too, since this was proposed by the chair of the Select Committee, at this point, the Select Committee has not met yet this interim. So we're not sure whether they will also be having further discussions on any part of this proposal. So a high-level summary to start off with of the proposal. It did merge LEF 1 with TERS 1. However, I'm not going to be going into detail about that. When the board discussed having this briefing last month, the board talked about not getting into that section of the bill since it is outside the board's authority, and the board wasn't interested in receiving more information about that, at least as part of this month's briefing. So instead, we'll focus on the bill creates a benefit improvement for Left 2 members. It transfers Left 2 benefit improvement account funds for purposes of the benefit improvement. And then it also freezes Left 2 contribution rates for 2 biennia. Provide a little more detail about those items here. So first, for active members, the benefit improvement was an increased multiplier for Left 2 members in the middle of their career. So what this part of the proposal did was a 2.5% multiplier for the 10 years of service between year 15 up to year 26. This was an option that it might sound a little familiar to those who've been on the board longer. It was an option that the board has received pricing on before, or similar to one of those options. The board had received pricing on a 3% multiplier for years 16 and over, and that is one of the possible benefit improvements that have been previously priced that are included on our Left 2 board website under our benefit improvement center. There's just been so much interest from members and stakeholder groups on potential cost of benefit improvements that we have created a central location on our website where we have past pricings available to help give people that, some more information about potential cost. I should add that those items on our website, they're not prioritized or ranked or anything like that. It's just a list of those options with a little bit of detail about when the pricing was put together. Next, the proposal did have a benefit improvement for some retirees and survivors. It was a $20,000 lump sum payment to all Left 2 retirees or survivor beneficiaries of members with at least 15 years of service. and then a $20,000 payment to all left to survivor beneficiaries of a member who died in the line of duty. That second bullet point did not require 15 years of service. The board received a lot of questions during the session about why $20,000. Since there wasn't a hearing on the bill, there was no public information made available about why that dollar amount was picked. Although the bill did include the same $20,000 lump sum payment to all Left 1 members as part of that Left 1 TERS 1 merger. Also, there were questions the board received during session about whether there would be an annuity option or just the lump sum option. And so under this bill, there was just the lump sum option. Often members are interested in an annuity option to kind of spread out that tax impact of receiving a lump sum payment. So there were members who did not receive a benefit under this proposal, a benefit improvement under this proposal. That included retirees with less than 15 years of service, disability retirees, both duty and catastrophic with less than 15 years of service, inactive vested members, and inactive non-vested members. So another part of this proposal was a transfer of all of the benefit improvement account assets to the Left 2 Trust Fund. This was to help fund the benefit improvements included in the bill. Going into session, the benefit improvement account value was a little over $374 million. The bill also included freezing the Left 2 contribution rates for the next 4 years. And then, yeah, just included those rates. My understanding of the intent of this section is that it would ensure that the benefit improvement will not result in a contribution increase for at least 4 years. And this would allow the legislature to guarantee that there would be the savings that they were looking for in the proposal. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mitch from the State Actuary's Office for a briefing on the actuarial fiscal note, and then be another opportunity for questions at the end of Mitch's presentation. And Mitch is taking control.
All right, thank you, Jacob, Mr. Chair, and members of the board. For the record, Mitch DeCamp, Office of the State Actuary. So yeah, Jacob covered the policy portion, and so now I'm going to cover highlights from our fiscal note. And just know that everything that I cover today is contained in the fiscal note. I've made some slight modifications to it just for presentation purposes. Now, I know probably all of you have already read that fiscal note cover to cover, but in case you haven't, I did include a link to it in the appendix of this presentation. So getting into the highlights, the first thing I want to cover here is this cost summary table. So if you pop open our fiscal note for a little light reading one evening, these are the tables you are going to see first. And I want to focus on that table on the right, the budget impacts table. I just want to be really clear what's in that table. That includes the Left 2 benefit and the merger. So that's what's on page 1. To get to the Left 2 specific, the Left 2 benefit improvement specific results, you got to go to the body of the fiscal note. And that's what I'm going to cover in the rest of the presentation. I just wanted to be clear what you're going to see when you open up that fiscal note. So let's go into the body, take a look at some of the results from our analysis. First thing I want to take a look at is the impact on pension liability. What the heck is pension liability? Well, you can think about that as the value of benefits measured at our most recent valuation. And that most recent valuation is the June 30, 2019 valuation. So now taking a look at this table, we have 2 measures of pension liability. We have their values under current law, their increase from this bill, and then the new totals under the bill. So now let's actually look at the results here. The first figure is the present value of future benefits. You can think about that as today's value, or the value at the valuation of all future expected benefits for current plan members. Resulting from this bill, we saw an increase of about 899, so about 900, and that is dollars in millions. So it was about a $900 million increase. The other measure of pension liability is the accrued liability, and that's sort of a subset of the present value of future benefits. It's the portion that has been accrued or earned as of the valuation date. And for that, we see the accrued liability increased by 625 or 625 million. So that's pension liability. As Jacob said, there was also assets that changed. Two pieces of asset changes here. There was a lump sum payout. That's the lump sum payout to annuitants, and then transferring the BIA assets, or that benefit improvement account assets, into the LEF2 trust. So let's cover that lump sum payout first. First, our eligible annuitant count. That's our estimate, 5,218. As Jacob said, those are members with that had at least 15 years of service or survivors of members that died in the line of duty. That's out of the total annuitants of 6,064. So about 850 not eligible for the benefit improvement. So we take that eligible count, multiply it by the benefit of 20,000, and then we discount it back 2.5 years from the payout date to our valuation date. And that gets us to our first bolded number there, 87. So that's 87 million for the lump sum payout. We then add our benefit improvement account assets, also on the valuation date. That's 322 million. Adding those together gets us our total asset change of 235 million. So that's 235 million additional dollars for LEF2 to pay benefits with. So now we've had liability changes, we've had asset changes. What do we do with those? Well, let's put them together in our favorite measure, funded status. Here in this table, I have the actuarial value of assets, accrued liability, and then our funded status. Funded status is just dividing the assets by the accrued liability. Quick reminder on what funded status is. You can think about it as a measure of how much accrued liability is covered by assets. So looking at our table here, current law, dividing A by B, we get a funded status of around 111%. We have our increases we saw from the prior two slides, 235 million additional assets, 625 million additional accrued liability. Then we get our new totals under this bill. And then again, dividing A by B, we get our new funded status, 107.2%. So what do we see? What do we take away here? Well, we see a decrease in funded status going from current law to the bill. Why is that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. More accrued liability entered the plan than assets. Anytime more accrued liability is entering than additional assets, funded status will come down. So this is funded status, really great measure, really important measure, but it's extra important to LEF2 because it is tied to funding policy. So let's take a look at that. But before we do, quick review of LEF2 funding policy. I know you guys are probably groaning just a little bit, but I promise I'll keep it high level, just the cliff notes here. So LEF2 funding policy selects the greater of two contribution rates, aggregate or minimum contribution rates. Let's start with those aggregate rates first. This is the aggregate cost method rates. This is the underlying cost method for LEF2 and all Washington state open plans like PERS and TERS. We all use the aggregate cost method. We then have minimum rates. And this is based on the normal cost of the entry age normal cost method. That's actuary speak. Really, these minimum rates, you can think of them as they tend to be a more stable rate, really lend themselves well to being minimum rates of the plan. So here's where it gets a little more complicated. So these minimum rates then change based on the funded status of the plan. And this is a funding policy choice that was adopted by the board. So these minimum rates, it's 100% of the minimum rate if funded status is equal to or less than 105%. The minimum rate's then reduced to 90% of the minimum rate if funded status exceeds 105%. Now, if you forget everything that I just talked about on this slide, just remember that last piece, 90% of the minimum rate if funded status exceeds 105%. Why is that important? I'm going to go back a slide. As we see under current law and this bill, funded status is greater than 105%. So according to the funding policy, the minimum rate is set at 90%. All right, so now we've got our funded status, we've got our funding policy. Now let's project it into the future to see what the next decade looks like. And that is what I have done on this slide. This is left to employee contribution rates and funded status. Now there is a ton going on this slide. So let me give you the lay of the land and then I'll get into the highlights. And there's a bunch of really cool stuff in there. I know, beware, your actuary said really cool stuff, but I promise it really is this time. So looking at this table, the second row there, biennium. So we're looking at values at different biennia, starting at the 21-23 and going out all the way to the 2029-31. So you're going out a decade here. So stepping down current law, under there we have employee, that's employee contribution rates, and then funded status. Stepping down again, we have this bill, that's again, employee contribution rates and funded status. And then third, finally, at the very bottom, a difference. So you can quickly tell the difference between the bill and current law. I'll just note here that I am showing just employee contribution rates for simplicity. Remember, employers and the state to contribute as well. So that's what's all in this table. Now let's get to the good stuff, the highlights here. Focusing on what's in the red box there, let's look at the first two biennia, the 21-23 and 23-25. Take a look at the difference down at the bottom. 0% difference for employee contribution rates. As Jacob pointed out, the bill freezes the rates at the, or caps them, I guess, at the current levels adopted by the board. So these rates were already adopted. You guys already adopted these rates. And then the bill says, nope, they can't change. So there's no difference in the rates for the 21-23 and 23-25 biennia. But we do see a decrease in the funded status, accounting for that additional accrued liability we saw a few slides ago. Now, stepping out one more biennia, 25-27, here is where we start to see some differences in contribution rates. So looking at first under current law, 7.74%. Funded status there, 113%, that's greater than 105%. So that 7.74% is the 90% minimum rate. Compare that to the biennium, the 23-25, the 8.53%, that's 100% of the minimum rate. So now 25-27, that's our first year where our model, using the left two funding policy, projects the first 90% minimum rate would occur. 7.74, 25-27 under current law. Now stepping down to this bill, looking at the funded status, again, funded status is over 105%, so we're in the 90% minimum rate, and that rate is 8.36%. Again, also the minimum rate. So you may be asking, what's going on? I thought there was this minimum rate. Well, under the bill, the minimum rate increases, and that's sort of the big note of this. This benefit improvement also increases the minimum rate. You can think of the minimum rate as this sort of average annual cost of benefits. And if the level of benefits of the plan goes up, like they do under this bill, the minimum rate rises as well. So the difference, very bottom rows there, 0.62%. And so that's what we see the difference starting in the 25-27 biennium. And in fact, when we look out over the remaining two biennia in this period, we see that 0.62%, continue on for the next 4 years as well. And if we could extend this further, it stays at that 0.62%. You astute observers might have also noticed that under the bill, the funded status kind of has a downward trend to it. It actually stabilizes right there at that 107.6 value. And if I extended it further, I don't want to throw too many numbers in there. If I extended it further, it would just stay right there at that 107.6. So that was a ton of information. And I know it's probably a little bit overwhelming, but there was a lot going on this bill, and it's a really big benefit improvement. And I think it's really important for you to see kind of all the nuts and bolts and how it flows through the system and through your funding policy and how it's going to impact funded status and contribution rates. So that was a lot. So I will just pause, see if you have any questions at this point. If not, I can always answer them at the end as well.
Mitch, Dennis here. So we're looking at the June 2019 numbers, correct?
Correct. Let's see. We actually then put it into our system and then kind of estimate what the avers are going to look like in the future, and that's what you're seeing in this table here.
Okay. So when we do a June, I think we're going to have an update here in the near future.
Yeah.
Is that going to change this? Because I mean, based upon market doing well, or at least suspected.
Correct. Yes, all of this would change. Yes, we take our June. Yeah, let me answer your question better than I just did. So we take our June 2019 AVER, and then we estimate future AVERs based off of our assumptions. So yes, the base model that we use is our most recent June 19 AVER. And when we update it to the 2020 AVER, which we're working on right now, these numbers will shift around.
I think there's Representative Burkos has his hand up. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So Mitch, a couple things, but one, it looks like kind of our new policy going forward combined with this benefit improvement would actually create a decrease in our contribution rate even with the enhancement. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, compared to what's currently adopted for the 21-23 and 23-25, yes, it would decrease contribution rates compared to what's currently adopted. Again, same caveats apply to what I just said based on the 2019 AVER.
And do you have like a ballpark difference between the state contribution number at the 7.74 employee versus the 8.36?
Oh,
25, 27. Like what kind of numbers? What are we talking about in state dollars in the 20%?
Yeah, for the state rate, I'm sorry, I don't have that directly in front of me right now. I wish I did. I know that the rate, so that employee rate is split 60-40 between employers and the state. So 40% times those rates would get you to the state rate. I apologize for not having those in front of me right now.
And then my other question would be this particular benefit the enhancement. What is the average kind of monthly benefit increase that a retiree or future retiree would see?
I don't have those numbers in front of me either, but I know that they are contained in the fiscal note. I don't want to hazard a guess right now on what those are, but we do include all of that kind of detailed information in the fiscal note.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I will go ahead and move on. Anything else? All right. So now we have our contribution rates. And so now what we can do with our projected contribution rates is we can then come up with budget impacts. And so here I have a budget impact slide. I've broken it into short-term and long-term budget impacts. Let's start with the short-term first, the table on the left. This is short-term. I'm deeming here the next 4 years, so 2 biennia. And we see something kind of weird here. We see actually a savings in the first 2 biennia. And that is because as part of this bill, we assume members will retire slightly earlier. And when there is no change in contribution rates for those biennia and members are retiring earlier, we see a slight savings. So kind of counterintuitive benefit improvement. You actually see a savings in the first 4 years. In contrast, moving to the long-term table on the right there, long-term I'm determining as 25 years here. That is where those increases in contribution rates start to be felt. And over 25 years, total employer and total employee, about 557 million each. And then that total employer, it is split. That's the 60-40 split between local government being the employers and then state. And then those dollars are in there as well.
Mitch, is that budget impact based on the aggregate rate, or is that based on the board's funded policy?
That is based on the funding policy. So that is using the same projected rates that we saw just a slide ago. So we take those same projected rates, we apply them against our projected salary, and then we come up with these long-term rates, or these long-term budget impacts. And I will just point out, big numbers, right? It is a big benefit improvement. 25 years is also a really long time. These things are hard to project, and it is over a 25-year period. So kind of take it all with a grain of salt.
Mitch, you had mentioned earlier that the rate freezing for the state, or I shouldn't say rate freezing, is it correct that they would not be making contributions for 4 years?
They would still be making contributions, but the rates are frozen at the currently adopted levels.
Okay. And so is there savings associated with that then as well?
Yeah, so the little bit of savings you see in that short-term budget impact table, right. So there's no savings from a reduced contribution rate. The savings comes from, we expect members to retire earlier, and when you retire earlier, you're not contributing anymore, and when you're not contributing, the state and your employer don't have to contribute as well, which is why it's a very kind of odd little quirk. We don't usually see benefit improvements that also freeze rates. All right, I will finish up with a little bit of risk analysis here. So everything you've seen up till this point has been assuming everything happens exactly as we would expect. Obviously, that's not going to happen. If it did, I probably wouldn't be working right now. So we did this risk analysis, taking a look at what happens when the future does not match our assumptions. And we wanted to look at two measures to assess risk. We wanted to look at affordability risk and solvency risk. Let's start with the affordability risk first. We looked at the probability of employee contribution rates above 10%. 10%, how do we select that? Well, that's just our own internal selection. That represents approximately a 20% increase in the currently adopted contribution rates. And then it's a nice round number, right? 10%, it's easy to remember. So looking at the table, this is our measure of affordability risk. Looking at the table, we have, again, current law and the bill, and we have some of these probabilities out from 2022 out to 2035. And looking out to 2030, 2035, we see about a 7 to 10% increase in the probability of employee contribution rates above 10%. And that makes sense, right? The bill is increasing the plan obligations. And when there's plan obligations are higher and the future is worse than we expect, it means we would need more contributions to get the plan back on track. Now, I will just pause here to say, same caveats apply. 2019 valuation, everything in the future matches our, or 2019 AVR, and then, we do all this analysis to kind of determine how the future may look different. As we step forward, say 2020 or 2021 AVR, all of this could look different. A good example is right now, investment markets have obviously been humming along in 2021, and it looks like we're on track for a great return. So these sort of probabilities could shift around as well. So try not to get too tied to these exact probabilities. Really kind of the overarching theme here is, are we adding more risk to the plan, and by about how much? The other risk measure we looked at is solvency risk, and we measured that by the likelihood of funded status less than 90%. We selected 90% instead of say 100% because, you know, when we start getting south of 90%, we start to get a little more concerned. And then so looking at the table up here on the right, we see this likelihood increases from current law to the bill. 2025 to about 2035 increases by 3 to 4%. So we have two different metrics here, but they're really telling a similar story. We're adding obligations to the plan, so we are also increasing some of the risks associated with the plan as well.
So Mitch, this is Mark. I have a question for you.
Sure.
So when you're talking about future experience that does not match the assumptions, are you really, the big measure would be the investment returns? Is that what you're talking about really? Is that the driver of future experience that you're talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
We can wiggle around a lot of assumptions, but it's really investment returns. I mean, you nailed it. They really drive the ship, and it's also it's very volatile. You know, the last decade returns have been really good, but if you graphed returns, it's also quite volatile from year to year. So, you know, how that volatility plays out, volatility up or volatility down over the next 10 or 15 years is really going to shape these risk metrics. And so with that pretty much wraps up all of the major highlights. I know it's probably a little more than just highlights I went through today, but again, I think it's really important stuff. I'll leave you with just a couple appendix slides here. This is the retirement rates. That center column is our best estimate retirement rates for the bill. Pretty modest adjustment to retirement rates. And then I wouldn't be a good actuary if I didn't end with some disclosures. A big one on there is the link to the fiscal note, as I know you're all going to check that out later. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions before I hand it back to Jacob.
Questions for Mitch? Not seeing you, Mitch. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for keeping it at my level. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with just next steps for the board. There are two issues that board staff need direction on from the board. The first is, does the board want staff to add the cost of this benefit improvement proposal to the Benefit Improvement Account Center on the Left 2 Board website that I discussed earlier? And then the second issue is, does the board want follow-up presentations by staff to further analyze any issues or questions that the board has on the benefit improvement in this proposal?
I think this is where we're looking for a little direction.
Do you want to take those one at a time?
Yeah.
So, you know, the first question that Jacob pointed out earlier, we've got several different benefit improvements that have been priced by the board in the past, and we put those all together on a benefit improvement account information center out on the board website. Do you want to add this particular benefit improvement, since it's been priced by the actuary's office, to that list that's out there of different proposals that have been priced? Does it make sense to add this?
I'm not seeing any reason why we wouldn't, but am I missing something?
No, we're just looking for direction from you guys. I'd hate.
Hey, Dennis, I agree with you, but Steve, if I might contribute something, can we talk about the big old elephant in the room, which is, of course, that this was introduced by somebody with an elephant moniker. I don't have any belief that this will go anywhere in the current political environment in Olympia. I'm so grateful that Mitch gave us an education about it, really super appreciative. But we didn't even get a hearing. And I
Yes.
feel like we're kind of getting wrapped around the axle on something that has just about as much chance as a snowball in hell. So I don't see any harm in saying, yeah, we think this is a good idea. But like so many good ideas that are introduced by the wrong party in Olympia, depending on your perspective, it's not going to go anywhere. And I don't want to mislead anyone that this just feels to me like either a promise that can't be kept or an idea that has not fully germinated and therefore, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so I offer that to you just because I feel like that's a view from a minority member who watched the whole thing unfold, but that it didn't even get a hearing is
Yeah.
pretty telling. So I just felt compelled to say that to you all.
Now, Senator, your points are really well taken. Both in a sense, this is the first time, for instance, that the actuary's office has had a chance to present their fiscal note to anyone. And this, obviously, that would have been a key issue had this gotten a hearing during session. And then similarly, Jacob pointed out, there were a ton of different questions about some of the specific pieces of the bill that never, no stakeholder groups got a chance to provide input on. None of those questions ever got answered. If the board were to move forward to try to answer some of those questions, to talk about, for instance, the pros and cons of allowing an annuity option instead of a lump sum, that's a good question for you guys. Is that going to be helpful, or is that going to feel like making promises that may not happen?
Senator, I thank you for your comments. I think the information, like I said, that I don't see a bad thing by putting it there. The other information that we have, kind of in the same ballpark, we haven't had, I wouldn't necessarily say hearings or momentum. Really, the board has been asked the staff to go ahead and cost out, the various things that we've explored or at least talked about from the board level. This is just one more of those items. I'm not convinced, that everything's dead. I think you obviously know Olympia much better than I do from the inside, but I think on any given day they say, something can happen, and so we're gonna continue to look at it. And like Steve, you just mentioned, I think we need to. I think we have a responsibility as a board to continue to look at ways to find ways to improve the benefits of our members, but doing so in a manner that is fiscally responsible, not to jeopardize the plan. I think that, as Mitch laid out, my general overview is it was great information. We look in the situation, not too far off where we thought we would be if we did something like this. So I think it's really inherent upon us to put that information out for our leadership. Maybe it'll help address the issues. I'm not sure.
And Dennis, don't get me wrong. I am in this body right now because I feel really committed to making sure that we take care of our law enforcement.
Yeah.
I just feel, and you have made really good points, and I don't disagree with anything that you said. I just feel a need from time to time to inject a big dose of reality.
I got you. I hear you loud and clear on the reality part. So yeah, I'm an optimist. All right, other comments? Senator, in the far left-hand corner. It's like watching Jeopardy, or not Jeopardy. It's the old Brady Bunch where I've got more family members than I probably need right now. So go ahead, Senator.
Hollywood Squares, I swear.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Senator Rivers, thanks for being the heavy on this one. So I didn't actually have to say it. So, but here's reality on this. We've got a bit of a conflict here because we actually have, part of our mission statement for our board tells us what we're supposed to pursue. And this is kind of front and center for benefit improvements. We see this a lot in the legislature where you see some members out there that do things that have a large group of people, slap them on the back and tell them, by God, you sure gave us a voice, you gave it the college try, and you accomplished nothing. I actually want to go forward with this, but I think we need to coordinate quietly with the legislature, maybe with leadership, and find out how we can do something like this before we waste time trying to do something that will be as Anna's in leadership, and she's telling you this probably is not going to get far. It's a large dollar amount out there that had a separate agenda when it was brought in the first place. And we were dealing with the first generation of managing expectations that this bill brought forward that got everybody's hopes up on this. I'm talking about a second generation of managing expectations of not putting something like this out in front of the general membership or posting it on our website yet, and creating a large amount of anticipation or expectation that something like this actually has the potential for passing in the coming session. I think this is a full year out beyond the following session that we need to work on this quietly and find out if there's an appetite for this. So we actually have the potential to be successful with this and accomplish something rather than just go up and give it the old college try and have our group tell us, yeah, you tried well, but you don't accomplish anything. And I see that so many different times along the way in the legislature, that's an attractive siren to do something like that, and yet have very little fruits for the results of your labors. I would like to have us not go forward with this at this point, but allow us, individually, maybe to contact direct access inside the legislature and take a temperature and find out what kind of appetite there'd be for this and report back so that anything we actually do refer has some potential for gaining traction and accomplishing something rather than just being another piece of window dressing. Because I've been on the board, 16 years now, and it's, God, you see after a while the things that we do that look like they're absolutely, wonderful ideas, and yet the political agenda or appetites are not there to do what we need to do to get them to happen. So I want to be successful at this. This is something that whose time is due, but to do that, I think, is not by going forward and putting this on the website and creating expectations now. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Hi, Dave. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you can hear that. I think he's at the airport.
I am communicating with him. I've got his mic open. We just got to get him to unmute, so I'll send him a request.
Oh, he's on now.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have two constituencies that we're trying to deal with here. And I totally respect the comment of the senator and my colleagues that we don't want to do this just for doing sake. By the same token, I think we want to let our members know what we're doing. So if there's a way we can share this with our members without raising the expectation, either with a qualifier that this may not go anywhere, so that they know we're doing something. By the same token, work behind the scene to get this moving. To totally not share it with our members, I think to some of them, it may appear like, what have you done for me lately? What are you doing? So I'm just stating that if there's a way to share with our members without raising the unrealistic expectation, I think we should do that. And with those that have experience with the legislators, if we can walk behind the scene to get this done I think we should make attempt to do that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ade. I think it's AJ's next.
Thanks, Dennis.
Good.
Yeah, I joined the left system about a year after Senator Holy was put on the left 2 board. And for those 15 years, I've been hearing about benefit improvement. And once I got more engaged about 5 years ago, started paying attention, I would say this is the closest we've ever been to actually seeing what a benefit improvement looks like and how much it costs. And, you know, I agree with Senator Rivers that, you know, 54, 53 probably isn't going anywhere. And, you know, it was introduced to kind of make a political point that we don't need to raise taxes to stabilize these pension plans, specifically TERS 1. But seeing where we're at now and seeing what we could do, especially after Mitch's presentation, I think we're closer than we think we are. And I think with a lot of work over the next 6 or 7 months and a lot of work during the 60-day legislative session, we could do something. And I think we need to try to do that.
Representative Berkowitz.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, no, I hear the points of the senators, but I also hear kind of what Ade is saying as well. You know, looking at our benefit improvement account website that we've got, that page, I'm looking at it right now. We've got a couple benefits that are in the $2 billion ballpark at cost. You know, we've had about a few years worth of benefit enhancement data on that site. I think adding this is an improvement to inform our members. We also have $400 million essentially sitting in a benefit enhancement account specifically and only to be allowed to use for benefit enhancement, right? And that situation alone, I think, is part of our duty is to make sure we're informing our members about the actions we're taking. And now that we've seen this report from the state actuary that basically says, look, essentially the state and members, because of the things we've done in the past, contribution rates would go down compared to where they are now, even with $1 billion enhancement. I think, you know, to AJ's point, we're closer than we realize, I think, to getting a benefit enhancement moving through the legislature. But, you know, obviously, people have probably been saying that for a couple decades. So, but there's money on the table already, and I think because of this actuarial report, kind of showing in real terms the true cost of what this type of benefit enhancement would take, and that it probably wouldn't be as huge of an impact as maybe people might have thought. We're closer than we think, and I do think we want to put that information on the website as soon as possible, because it's already out there. This is just an actuarial report. It's already in the public domain. Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to share that with our members? That's just my perspective.
Other comments?
So yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Mark Johnston.
Good, Mark.
So just a couple of things. I think what we're really up against in a couple of respects is managing expectations and transparency. And I want to make sure that our members understand that this bill, it was completely separate from anything that the left board had proposed. And stakeholder groups of all the stakeholder groups weren't consulted with regard to this particular bill. I'm not necessarily opposed to putting the pricing of this on the website, but if we can add the full bill and not just the benefit improvement pieces that are included in the bill for left 2 members, I think it's important in the general sense for everybody to understand, stakeholders to understand that the bill is more comprehensive than just a benefit improvement for the left plan 2 members, active and retired. So with that, I would also say that, so the transparency thing is important in the larger perspective for me. Managing expectations is a completely different set of subjects that we should pay attention to. And that's going to take place in the legislature. It's going to take place with all the different stakeholder groups, the employers, the senators and representatives, and the member stakeholder groups. So I think there is a lot of possibility with regard to some sort of a benefit improvement, but I don't think the board should be wedded to that specific bill, although there were some interesting ideas in there about a benefit improvement, but none of the stakeholder groups were consulted. So I don't have a problem with putting the pricing on there, with maybe just a caveat that this is a larger bill than that specific benefit improvement. And I think it will devolve into the political sphere with regard to some sort of a benefit improvement. And I think it's very interesting that the benefit improvement that's been proposed, even with the improvement, the funding status of the plan stays above 105%. And it doesn't increase, and the contribution rates decrease. So those two things are kind of a nexus for me.
Mr. Chair.
And that's all I've got.
Senator Holy, go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mark, for saying that. You explained it much better, more succinctly than I could have on that. If you would possibly reduce that to a motion, I think I'd vote for it.
Sure. So I'll make a motion that that the board publishes the pricing for that benefit, but including information about the actual Senate Bill 5453, and the fact that it includes more than just the benefit improvement included in that bill. That it had to do with the TERS 1, PERS 1, or TERS 1, LEF 1 merger, and that the board doesn't necessarily weigh in on that. That it was we weren't consulted and the stakeholder groups weren't consulted. If that's, I tend to be not succinct, but
Holy seconds that.
Discussion. Steve, got a question for you, just to make sure. I pulled up Representative Berquist, and mentioned that benefit improvement account information is located on our website. We do have the ability, we can put the issue down there. I'm looking at this right now. We can be restrictive. We can put little notations and probably put links, I assume, that would open up the bill in its entirety. I think we can accomplish that. You think so, Steve? I mean, what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think the fiscal piece of the benefit improvement itself can fit well with the existing format that we have on the website, the LF2 benefit improvement piece of it, the costs associated with that. And then we can add in a link to the bill itself, or the full fiscal note to if somebody wants to look at the broader context.
Mark and Senator Holy, does that meet your kind of your thought? I just want to make sure we're all talking the same thing, apples and apples. Right?
yes, that would meet the intention of my motion.
Okay, thank you. Senator Holy, are you okay with that?
Very good.
Good, thank you. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the motion passes. So that will be added to the website as I guess noted in the motion in a second. The second item was the follow-up piece. And so where do we want to include this, or how do we want to move forward? Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, so the question here has to do with the, Jacob did a good job pointing out that after the bill was introduced, and really for the entirety of the rest of the session, even after cutoff and it hadn't been heard, questions were coming in about specific pieces of the bill or the benefit improvement piece of the bill. Was there any thought given to an annuity option as opposed to just a lump sum as an example? Would you like to follow up on some of those questions so that you can provide some input or give the opportunity for stakeholders to provide their points of view on some of these things? Like, for instance, the annuity versus lump sum might not have any cost, and the pros and cons, you know, that's a that might be an interesting discussion, particularly in the event if there is a legislative proposal in the future, then it would help the discussion or the input from the stakeholders might help form or craft what that benefit improvement would look like. Some of the questions then end up being a lot bigger, but there was room on the agenda for the interim. There was already part of the plan was to do what we call benefit improvement account follow-up. Some of these questions could fit into that. They'd be just smaller chunks, for instance, in the future meetings where we could raise the questions that came up and then give you guys an opportunity to provide input or come up with follow-up questions. The only caveat would be the impact on the actuaries. So we wouldn't want to be bombarding the actuary with a bunch of different proposals that would require pricing from them. That would be the only workload impact caveat that I would like to make you aware of as you consider this.
Is there flavor amongst the group to add this to our interim for follow-up? Just basically placing this under the, Steve mentioned, the benefit improvement discussion points. Keep it moving, keep it live. Mark, is that you?
So, yeah, I mean, I guess all the stakeholder groups should have input into if there is an appetite among all the stakeholder groups to seeing what would be feasible and reasonable in terms of benefit improvements, especially considering the actuaries report that even a benefit improvement of that magnitude in terms of the dollars is going to have the net result of a decrease in contribution rates. And we have to also make sure that we consider that part of that bill that Mitch and Jacob reported on was that the contribution rates will be frozen for the next 4 years. I don't know if that's something that would be palatable to the stakeholder groups, if it makes sense. And I'm talking about all the groups represented. I'm talking about the state representatives, I'm talking about the employer representatives and the employee representatives, about how that would work. That's a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but I do think that there is an opportunity here to have all the parties contribute to something that makes sense and isn't unreasonable, but consider the funding status and the possibility of a benefit improvement account with a reduction in contribution rates as something that is very unusual. And I think to a certain degree, it is a factor of what the board and the legislature have accomplished together over the last many years, 20 years now almost, with regard to the creation of the board and the way that we've stabilized funding for all the groups. So I don't know how to you know, it's not really my purview to proceed, but I would say as a board member that I would be intrigued by engaging all the groups. Technically, I'm not sure how to do that because we all have our own representative groups who weigh in on this stuff when it comes to the legislative process. I don't want to make sure that everybody's included, that all the groups are included, and that we have a thorough discussion about what's reasonable and what's practical.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? AJ, I guess. I don't know if you're off mute, so
I think we need to keep moving forward on this. And do we need a motion to do that?
I think Steve was kind of looking for something motion-wise, which puts it in play and keeps it moving for the staff to work on. So,
okay,
if that's the case.
Well, I'd make a motion to continue moving forward with working towards this benefit improvement during the interim.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded to basically continue the process of providing more information to move forward on the future. There's discussion. Wolf, I see you're off mute, so do you have a comment? Sorry.
Nope, just toggled off mute, sorry.
That's all right. I'll make sure I don't miss you. That's the last thing to hear. Mark, I see you lit up. You want anything to say?
No, I speak in favor of the motion.
All right. All right. Make sure I don't miss anybody here. Nobody in the chat. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right. All righty. Steve, anything on that item? For that section?
No, that, I think that provides us with sufficient direction.
Okay.
And then if we have questions pop up, we'll handle those on kind of on a month-by-month basis.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda was the law enforcement officer demographic impact study. That's a follow-up, and then looks like we're turning this over to Jacob as well. Steve, you got anything? Well, anything? Jacob, are you jumping right in?
Okay.
Did you say anything?
I think I'm going to jump right in.
All right.
Okay. Okay. For the last time today, for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The issue in front of the board today is at the April board meeting, questions were raised regarding the potential impacts to Left 2 of an increased number of law enforcement officers who have decided to leave the profession over the last year. Wanted to add, last summer we did touch on this topic, but at that point it did feel like it was a lot of more anecdotal evidence of officers either thinking of leaving or potentially leaving. And I know there's been more and more news articles recently where there is appears to be data coming in that is actually occurring. And so I'm going to share some of the same information that we went over last year on this subject, but then also we'll be sharing some preliminary demographic data that we were able to get from the Department of Retirement Systems. And I do want to stress that it's preliminary. I'll go over this probably caveat some of the data I share again. But typically the data that we share has gone through demographic data that we would share with the board it's first gathered by DRS from employers and then would go to the actuaries and they do more further work on that to refine that data before it would be published in documents like the actuarial valuation report and other demographic presentations that the actuaries do for the board. So with that caveat, here is a look at some of the data we have received from DRS. And this is just through the first 10 months of fiscal year 2020. What this shows that least I thought was interesting, was how there have been the number of terminations and retirements for law enforcement versus firefighters and the total, and then the amount of new hires. And so just to do some of this math for you, for law enforcement officers, there have been 771 who have left, and with the new hires, that's for a net loss of 419 officers. And then for firefighters, 353 have left, and there's been a net gain of 192 officers. Go to this next slide that provides some historical data. So as you can see, this does follow an overall trend of an increase in retirements for the plan, and that is in large part due to the plan maturing. And then also there's been an increase in terminations, which is not tied to the plan maturing, or at least not tied to it as much as retirements. And then I do need to add also that the 2020 data is also, we did receive that from the actuary's office. That is preliminary data also, just not as preliminary as the 2021 data. It has been worked on somewhat by the actuaries, but they are still refining that before they would normally publish it. So we already have more terminations and we'll have more retirements than in recent years. So how might this impact LEF2? There's more detailed answers in the next slides, but just an overall picture of how an increase in terminations or retirements typically impacts the plan is that terminations are generally a savings to the plan. Retirements are generally a cost to the plan. And then they often, when there's an increase in both, will offset each other. So this is a slide that I stole from the State Actuary's Office, a presentation they gave to the board during last year's October strategic planning meeting. The presentation was titled LEF2 Demographics and Risk Measures. And so this slide addresses the general question of what if there was a large and unexpected shift in demographics, such as an increase in terminations and or retirements. And so generally what they told the board was that the experience would be included in their next actuarial valuation report. It may impact the calculated contribution rate, and that OSA would consider if changes to the long-term assumptions are necessary, and that minimum contribution rates under the current funding policy offer resilience to unexpected demographic changes, and that the contribution rates under the aggregate cost method would be more volatile than the method adopted by the board. So in last year, the board did request from the actuaries more specific information regarding the impact of changes to the demographics of the plan. We asked the actuary's office for 4 hypotheticals. Last summer, there was a lot of discussion around what might potentially happen in Seattle. So 2 of those hypotheticals were specific to Seattle and 2 were more general. In discussing this with the actuary's office and preparing for this presentation, they felt that it was the data we saw for these hypotheticals around Seattle was analogous to what we would see across all LEFs, that there was not a big enough difference in those Seattle officers versus the general LEF2 officers to not be able to, for informational purposes, apply the information they provided us last year. Quickly go through these hypotheticals, but first, the actuaries did ask me last year to include this disclaimer in my presentation, so I assume they would appreciate it if I included it this year also before sharing their analysis of those hypotheticals. I think the main points here are that this is for educational purposes, and that not to rely on this analysis beyond last year's interim. So hypothetical 1, the termination of the 700 least senior active members from the Seattle Police Department with no replacement members. The actuaries projected that that would be an overall savings to the plan. And here you see the decrease to the contribution rate and a slight increase to the plan funded status. The termination of members who are early in their careers is a savings because these members will receive a lower benefit than if they had remained active in the plan. So as you can see from the very minimal decrease to the contribution rate and increase to the plan funded status, that there is no risk to the plan in this hypothetical. Hypothetical 2, the termination of the 90 least senior and retirement of the 90 most senior active members from the Seattle Police Department with no replacement members is projected to result in an overall cost to the plan. That cost is so slight that there's no impact to the contribution rate and a 0.2% decrease to the plan funded status. More retirements of left 2 members than expected is a cost because they begin commencement of benefits earlier than is currently assumed. Once again, as you see, there being no impact to the contribution rate, there is no risk to the plan under this hypothetical. Okay, hypothetical 3. A reduction in assumed future salary growth by 0.25% is projected to result in an overall savings to the plan. Lowering future salary growth results in lower expected benefits upon retirement and is a savings to the plan. However, the system will also have lower future salary to collect contributions over, which creates a cost to the plan. The lower retirement benefit savings offset the cost from lower contributions to yield an overall contribution rate reduction. Once again, a very minimal impact to the plan and no risk to the plan under this hypothetical. And then the final hypothetical we asked the actuaries to provide analysis for. And so this one, this is actually an update from last year. At the point we gave this presentation last year, the actuaries were still working on the 2019 projection system, the actuarial valuation report. It was not complete. And so that is now complete, and they were able to provide this information to us. So a reduction in the number of assumed annual future hires by 0.25% is projected to result in an overall savings to the plan. Once again, no risk to the plan. So that completes the analysis done by the actuaries. It shows that an increase in terminations and retirements will not have any substantial kind of impact on left 2. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Any questions, Don? I'm not seeing hands and nothing in the chat, so I'm not missing anybody. Kenny, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, that is a little bit better. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, Jacob, thank you. I don't see any questions for you on that issue. So item number 5. Steve.
All right. For the administrative update, I've got a couple of items that I wanted to go over with the board. First off, as you'll recall, there was a provision in the state budget to add a new ombudsman position to the team here at the board. We had to get that position created and approved and banded by OFM, and we found out just earlier this week there was some delay in that. The banding criteria has changed, and so even though this ombudsman position was nearly identical, to the existing position. There was some concern initially that they would not be able to band it the same, or even maybe to include it in WMS. But we have worked through all of that with OFM and got approval earlier this week that to move forward on that. So that's a positive update. There's still a little bit of paperwork to take care of, but then I'll be able to move forward on the hiring now that I know I've got a job description that's approved and a pay scale that's approved. The second thing that I wanted to give you an update on is there were 3 board member positions that were up for reappointment. All 3 of the current board members expressed an interest to the governor's office in being reappointed, and all 3 have been appointed. So that's AJ representing the firefighters, Jason Graneman representing law enforcement, and Ade representing the employers. All 3 of those board members have been reappointed to new terms. So congratulations, all 3 of you have been excellent board members. So it's nice to have that continuity and to be able to continue working with you. The third thing I wanted to talk about was the SIB. There was another provision in the state budget as well, allowing the board to use the State Investment Board boardroom for the upcoming biennium. The plan that I wanted to go over with you guys is that the first sort of, for lack of a better word, hybrid board meeting using the SIB boardroom the plan is that would be September. So we would continue doing remote meetings like we're doing today in June and July. Then the board is not scheduled to have a meeting in August. By September, then we'd be ready to go, having public access, optional board member attendance in person, and staff present, and we'd be using the SIB boardroom. And that would fit in with the plan that, or the discussion that you had earlier with the plan for the October meeting. By September, I think we should have I'm hoping we will have clear guidance from the governor's office and other appropriate agencies about how to reopen a board meeting safely, meeting all of the guidelines. But that's the tentative plan. We'd begin having meetings, some kind of meetings in the SIB boardroom, starting with the September board meeting. And I just wanted to put that out there and see if that, get feedback from you guys, if that sounds reasonable. Or if you have questions about that.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, that concludes everything that I had for the for my administrative update, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to answer questions about anything else that was not covered.
Are there any questions for Steve? All right, seeing no questions or hearing, seeing no hands up, or hearing no questions, we'll go ahead and we will be, Victoria, there he is. We will be adjourning to enter into executive session. I would imagine we've noted probably, it looks like about a half hour, 45 minutes. The way you look at this thing, Steve, 11:45, 45 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I think if you were to, I think it can be covered in, say, 15 minutes. Or okay. if you wanted to provide notice that the board would resume at 11:30, I think that we can meet that.
Okay, all right. So the purpose of our executive session is to review the performance of a public employee and then also to discuss general wage increases for the 2021-2023 operating budget. We have a separate link, so our guests who are joining us will not be able to, we'll be exiting this meeting and jumping on a separate link to go into a virtual executive session. So, Tor, am I missing anything?
I think you got it covered. You provided a time estimate and the purpose of the executive session, which I understood to be to review the performance of a public employee.
Correct, as well as, yeah, the general wage increase.
Excellent.
Yes, if
right.
there's any board members that don't have the link to the executive session, please reach out to Tammy or Jesse or Jessica. We'll get that sent to you. Tim did say he sent it to your primary and secondary email addresses just shortly before the start of this board meeting. So you should have it, and that's where you can look for it.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and we need a motion to it.
No, you just you just leave this meeting and join the exec, and then you'll rejoin this meeting at 11:30.
All right, we'll see everybody back at 11:30.
All right, Mr. Chair, then you with Mark on board, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Steve. All right, we are back in business. We do have a quorum present. Executive session has ended, and we'll go ahead and open up the floor for action.
I'd like to make a motion, Dennis, that we accept the general wage increase for the staff.
Okay.
I second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion been made and seconded for a general wage increase for the staff. Is there discussion on that?
Dennis, this is McElligott. Can you hear me now?
I can. Thanks, Pat.
Okay.
Is there a comment on the motion to pursue the general wage increase for staff?
Not for me.
Aude is still trying to connect to audio, Dennis.
Okay. All right. Looks like I don't need to see Aude anymore.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
lost him.
Yeah, so we do have a motions before the group. The motion was made to support the pursue these general wage increase for the staff. So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, Steve, I believe that has concluded all of our work for our May meeting, unless I'm missing something. It looks like we completed our agenda.
Yes.
All right, so at this point in time, I would entertain a motion. Before I do, just I know we're getting into the season of people starting to travel, and our Vice Chair Granneman, Jason Granneman's in Hawaii right now, so I'm hoping he's having a good time. If you're not able to join us in our June meeting, again, thanks to our staff for always reaching out and making sure we have a group together. So stay in contact with each other as we go about it. Be safe in your travels. It looks like June 16th is our next meeting. So if there's anything, Steve, you got something to say? Looks like you do.
Who's that, me?
Yeah.
No, I realized in my admin update, I forgot to mention that I spoke at Walk-Ups last Friday. No, that's all you're very intuitive. If you could pick that up, but that's what was on my brain.
Yeah, I could see the smoke coming out the ears.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, way to go, AJ.
Second.
Second.
Look at you guys. All right, motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. Will be all those in favor, click off. Everybody else who wants to stay and talk to Steve and I about pensions, you're welcome to stay. Or Tor can give us a class on state stuff. We'll see how popular we're gonna see how popular you are, Tor. All right,
That
thanks.
comes next month.
Thanks. Be safe out there.